about the top ways that agents give value to their clients as sellers. Let's get into it. Today, we have Tom Krieger, our team lead here. He's going to enlighten us a little bit on the important points and the different places where having a licensed realtor represent you adds value to you as a seller. All right, well, thanks, Tom, for coming and talking to us today. We've got quite a few points to go over here.
Yeah, it looks like an awful lot. Maybe we should break this up into maybe 4 sections.
Probably.
Okay.
So let's hit them one at a time.
Okay.
Kind of starting from the beginning here. Researching a property and giving a valuation, what do you mean by researching a property? I know agents come in with a value, but is there research that goes into that more than just taking a look around the neighborhood?
Oh, yeah. There's absolutely a lot of research that goes into it. And the more detailed you get, the better the results are. So it's real important for a real estate agent who you're working with to understand that valuing your property or setting a price on your property is not a science. It's an art form.
Interesting.
Yes.
So what do you mean by that?
So sometimes you have to realize what the local market likes. So for instance, in the greater Tucson area from where we're at, views of the mountains or views of the sunset have much greater values than the view out the back of your yard at your neighbor's yard.
Okay, that makes sense.
It also has value to the neighborhood when you have an HOA, a homeowners association, versus what we call almost a wildcat type of development, where every house is different, it doesn't flow, the streets don't flow correctly. Also, what's important is schools. Not all communities have the top schools.
Okay.
Some communities don't.
Okay, so basically making sure that local professional knows what sells in a community, what provides actual value to your home versus what is just a nice thing that people aren't going to be willing to necessarily shell out extra money for.
Yeah, so imagine you're going to price a house and that home is in a retirement community. Are you really going to spend time on the school system there? Absolutely not.
No.
You're going to spend time on resale value.
Sure.
You're going to spend time on HOA costs and the rate of rise in HOAs because most people retire on a fixed income.
Sure.
So if you're valuing a property that is in an HOA that, let's say, has a capital improvement to it of $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000, that's going to affect the buyer when they buy the property of, do I really want to spend this type of money up front for this house, or am I going to look at the value of that house and subtract that type of capital improvement fee? Being wise to that, understanding that market, researching the local aspects of that are what a good real estate agent should be doing. It isn't just belonging to an MLS and throwing a sign in the front yard. That doesn't make you a good selling agent.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, with all the ins and outs, making sure that they're all being looked at and accounted for correctly is going to be really important in getting off to the right start.
Yeah, for valuing it. Yeah.
Okay. Now, then, talk to me about listing disclosures. I know we've spoken about disclosures before and how important they are. How is that important to a seller as far as making sure that things are done right? They're protected, I assume? What's the point of
So it's real important for the real estate agent when they're speaking with their client, the seller, to explain to them the disclosures that they have to give to the potential buyers. So here in Arizona, we have to give a seller property disclosure statement, which is everything the seller knows about the property so that it takes away a little bit of the buyer beware aspect of buying a house, okay? They can't hide things there, they know that are there, like a leaky roof or mold in the bathroom or something like that.
Sure.
But there's also the disclosures you can't discriminate against the protective classes. And, it seems that we're adding more and more to those protective classes so that it's very important for the agent to understand a protected class and then share that with the seller so that they don't get in any type of issues, legal issues with maybe discrimination. We don't want that. Then there are the lead-based paint disclosures, that we have to disclose that the house could have lead in it if the house was built prior to 1978. Then there's the disclosures that you have to give when it comes to working with another agent that works in the same brokerage house, and on and on and on. And it almost seems, Jill, that every year we've got one or two more disclosures. Does the real estate company have a relationship with a company that provides services to a real estate transaction? That's a disclosure that needs to be made, right? Is the seller a licensed real estate agent? That's a disclosure that has to be made. There are a tremendous amount of disclosures that need to be made to keep the seller from standing in front of a judge.
And I think nobody wants to be there.
No, nobody wants to be
So
there.
it sounds as though another one of your major value pieces is making sure that the seller is covered as best they can in notifying everyone of everything that needs to be to reduce their liability.
Correct. They say sunshine is the best disinfectant, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. And then, as far as setting expectations and things like that, what is your role in market conditions, projections, pricing? How does that work?
Well, a good real estate agent will understand what's happening in the marketplace because they're in the marketplace, right? They're checking what we call the hot sheets every morning to see what new properties are coming on. They're checking the just sold or just under contract to see, okay, what is an average 1,500 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car garage selling for in this area, okay? Because they do move a little bit, okay? And as I said, it's not an exact science, but you got to know where the pitch is supposed to be thrown. Right? You can't throw it to the second baseman when the batter's in the batter's box, right? You've got to know where to throw the ball.
Yeah.
So I really think that agents need to be aware of pricing. They need to be aware of what the public is looking for and what they're not looking for. Okay? So we see sometimes people move certain directions like, okay, I want to maybe buy a home to add some value to it, right? And then we find people looking to want to buy a home that's brand new. What is the market doing, and how does that affect the pricing of your home currently and what's happening in the marketplace?
Okay, so really helping them understand different scenarios that could happen and, more importantly, why. I think people can accept things if they can understand the why.
Yeah, give them as much data as you can, but don't get them glossy-eyed when you give the data.
Right.
Give it in a manner that they can understand it.
Sure. Okay, and then, a lot of our sellers, I think, hire an agent because they don't know how to market a house and actually get it sold. So what's your role in that? I mean, do they just hand it over to you, or is there...
So when it comes to marketing, there are several ways to market a real estate home. There's the easy way, the lazy way, and we call it, the 3 S's. They throw a sign in the yard, right? And then they say that they're going to market the house, and then they sit back and they wait for somebody else to sell it. Or another acronym they like to use is the 3 P's in real estate, where they place a sign in the market and they place it in MLS, and then they pray that another agent has a buyer to sell it. Then there are the agents similar to us, and there are many good agents out there, and those agents take the time to understand how to market a property, how to bring it to the market in the best possible condition to get the best possible price in the best possible time for the seller. And I say it that way because not all sellers are worried about getting the top dollar, and not all sellers want to sell overnight. Okay, so there is a mix. The ingredients are a little bit different, but the best for that seller of those 3 ingredients. It's
fine-tuning it for their
Exactly.
particular situation.
Exactly. It's really important also that when you're marketing it, that you reach as many people as possible to let them know the property's for sale, and also to take that type of property and bring it to a demographic that's looking for that type of property.
Okay.
You're not going to, and again, I like to use this example because we are in Tucson and it is kind of a retirement town. You're not going to market a 55 and above community to first-time home buyers.
Right.
because they can't live there,
That
right?
doesn't, most of them are well under 55.
But I have seen that done with other agents who have
Interesting.
marketed to, like, what are you doing? These people, well, maybe it's their they're dancing, right?
Right.
It's not their grandkids.
Right.
They're just not understanding how to market. We, fortunately, have a really great marketing division in our team that we've hired specifically to structure the marketing for our listings to fit the buyers that we're going after. Hey everyone, we want to interrupt this episode to let you know that we are a Keller Williams Southern Arizona franchise.
We are also realtors practicing equal housing. Now let's get you back to the podcast.
And then as far as behind the scenes work, I think that's where a lot of people don't realize there's stuff that goes on. They just see the face of their agent and then all these things happen and the agent did it, right?
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's not true?
So let me just give you an example for today. And this happened today, actually. I ended up having to run down to the assessor's office in Pima County here in Tucson because the assessor's office and where we get our information on a software program were totally different. And what they were trying to tell us is that the land that we were trying to sell so somebody could put a house on it was way less in square footage than the actual parcel of land. So we had to do some research. We got a research person on our team. We like to call her the Sherlock Holmes of the internet because she can dig real deep into it. And Heather was able to find the joint tenancy deed. She was able to find the original assessor's map, and then she was able to find some documentation where they recoded the lot. We ended up going down to the assessor's office because we had an offer on the property, and the buyer said, hey, wait a minute, what it says in the computer here isn't enough square footage for us to put a house on because it doesn't fall within the zoning, right? So we ended up going down there, getting that all straightened out and coming back here. That was a 2.5-hour process that nobody knows anything about, that we ended up having to do. We literally had to do it for the buyer because the buyer's agent couldn't figure it out. We did it for the seller because this isn't what the seller does. They're, they're doing their own job. So this is just one thing that happened today. Another thing that happened today is I had to go out to a listing that we had, and I literally had to open the house up so somebody could come in and take the junk out of the house. Because the sellers are deceased, the seller's representatives, the kids, are in different states. Here's the real estate agent that is doing all of that behind-the-scenes work.
To making sure
just
everything.
do things today.
Yeah, making sure everything is actually running smoothly.
Yeah.
So it sounds like if you're doing your job, it looks like it's all flowing smooth.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Now, you mentioned before about protected classes. One of the things that you need to do as a seller is figure out, like, if there's multiple offers, which one are you going to accept? Why are you going to accept it? And what about the people who aren't super serious? So what's your role there for a seller?
Okay, so we like to call them tire kickers. A lot of times a real estate agent will hold a house open and you'll get a bunch of tire kickers the first time, or neighbors. That's a polite word to call them. What we do as real estate agents is we want everybody in the general public who has an interest in seeing the house, even if it is just to see the decorating ideas, or how did they take the floor plan that we actually have in our development and arrange their furniture. Okay?
Right.
Because I've been doing this for 47 years, you never know when that person might go, I like the way they did this. I think we're going to buy this and we'll put ours up for sale.
I was going to say, this is better and I don't have to do anything to it.
Exactly, yes. So we look at it that way. When we are marketing a house and we have an interested buyer, one of the first things we want to make sure is that the buyer is qualified if they're interested in actually purchasing the property.
Okay.
But if they're not, but they are interested in buying a property, we have many other sellers. Maybe one of our other sellers' property would fit this buyer. And so we're going to try and talk to this buyer and see if they'd be interested in seeing something else that's similar to this property.
Okay.
when we get an offer or when a person is interested in buying the property, whether we're the person working with the buyer or it's a different agent that's working with the buyer, we are going to protect the seller by making sure that buyer can demonstrate they can afford to buy the property, whether it's a finance transaction or whether it's a cash transaction. Obviously, if it's a cash transaction, we're going to make sure that they have proof of funds. So we're going to request that. If it's a finance, we're going to make sure that we get a pre-qualification letter and proof of the down payment funds, okay?
Right.
After the offer gets accepted, how do we protect the seller? We make sure that the inspections get done,
Okay.
And we address those types of things too.
Okay.
Many different things. I could kind of go on and on and on, but those
Yeah.
are some of the big ones.
Okay. Now, one thing that a lot of people don't know about is like something called RESPA.
Yep.
And apparently you, as a seller's agent, need to be able to navigate that, explain that, as well as national and state laws and things. So in what way do you work with the seller on that?
So RESPA, basically, it's a government law, rule, mandate. I don't know the exact term, but it's one of those things that get you in big trouble, okay?
Okay.
Everything needs to be disclosed on a disclosure statement, okay? If there is an activity on a disclosure statement where money is being transferred or something is being paid for, and there's a relationship to that business and or entity, it needs to be disclosed. So we talked about earlier, if a real estate company, XYZ Realty, has a relationship with ABC Title Company, and they own stock in it or have some type of an ownership in it, and there's some type of compensation or profit to be made on it, that needs to be disclosed to all parties in a transaction.
Okay.
If a real estate company has their own lending, okay, or it's similar to their own lending and they don't have an ownership in it and the buyer is using it, the buyer and the seller both need to be made aware that there's a relationship there, okay? RESPA always is also about those companies that you have a relationship with cannot give you something of value without disclosing it, and there's limitations of how much they can give you.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So a title company may want to help the real estate agent out by creating postcards, just listed or just sold postcards. The money that the title company puts in to help that has to be a certain percentage, and it's not over 50%. Okay? Same thing with the marketing of that. The title company has to be displayed on that type of a marketing piece, and it has to be less than 50% of the page.
Okay, so making sure that your seller's marketing and everything holds to correct standards.
So
Okay.
RESPA is very important. The other aspect of it too is that under RESPA violations, with this new NAR coming out, I envision those to change. We don't have any changes yet that I'm aware of that are like locked in concrete, but
They're coming.
America, they're coming.
Okay. Now, as far as the title commitment goes, isn't that just a report from the company? And what's your role with that as far as a seller?
Okay, so as a agent who represents the seller, once they receive an offer, then the seller is supposed to provide, here in Arizona, the seller is supposed to provide the buyer a title policy. Now, here in Arizona, we have something called an ALTA, American Land Title Association title policy. And what a title policy is, an insurance policy given to the buyer from the seller at the seller's cost, guaranteeing that the property has no liens and or encumbrances on the property. And now a lien could be a tax lien, it could be a mortgage, it could be a home equity line of credit. It could be the neighbor has a lien on the property because the neighbor gave the homeowner 10 feet of land and the homeowner offered to buy it but pay him for it when he sold his property, right? So that would be like a lien. Another lien on the property are quote, property taxes. Okay, those got to make sure they're clear. Potential HOA liens or payments in arrears, all of that stuff needs to be addressed in HOA, that there is or isn't any of that out there. Are there any other claims to the property, maybe dating back to 1914?
Okay.
Okay. So you as a real estate agent need to be able to read through the commitment and understand what everything in there is. Most of the time we look at that under a Schedule B. Those are like the exceptions to the coverage, okay? And every once in a while you'll find a red herring someplace. I found one where a water company had a 36-inch water mains 55 feet below the property and nobody knew about it.
Oh, wow.
It took us a year and a half to get it resolved.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so making sure that you're able to read that and explaining then, I'm assuming, to your sellers, if there's anything on there, what it means to them.
Exactly. Like sometimes things will come up that were unrecorded. We just recently had something where there was a loan on the property that was paid off to a company. I believe it was Household Finance. They went out of business, but they were bought by another company. I can't remember it right offhand. We ended up having to go through 2 companies to finally find that that was paid off.
Oh, wow.
It was, probably 2 weeks worth of work.
Wow.
Yeah.
To make sure that
Nobody
that
knew
got
about
cleared.
it. The seller knew about it because I had to ask him a lot of questions, but nobody sees any of that work behind the scenes.
No, they really don't. And then, the MLS data, making sure it's accurately described. Obviously, if you're helping sell a property, you need to make sure they're relying on you, right, to make sure all that stuff is done correctly.
Yeah. When you fill out the MLS data sheet or any publication that goes out to the public, you want to make it sure it's as exact as possible. Although, like anything else, we get typo errors, or maybe the seller thinks, hey, the roof was replaced in 2021 when it really was 2018.
Okay.
So those are some minor discrepancies. So we want to help protect the seller from misrepresenting. The seller may say, well, we had this problem one time in the bathroom where we noticed some water on the floor, but we haven't noticed anything since. Well, the real estate agent who goes and looks at the property, sees this little bubbling on the latex paint, may want to say something to the seller. Hey, this is something we need to pay attention to, and we need to make sure that we disclose this in those seller property disclosure statements. Or maybe there's a small piece of property in a flood zone. That needs to get in the MLS and on the data sheet and all of that. So
that it's all
we got to make
disclosed.
sure all the information and how we present it to the public is accurate.
So taking what the sellers provided you with what you've researched and making sure that it's being portrayed as clearly as possible to keep the seller, legal and out of potential trouble.
Exactly. And also for us to draw the line too.
Sure.
We're not going to give legal advice.
Right.
We tell the seller, look, at this is kind of a conundrum here. You need to go see an attorney. I can give you an opinion, but my opinion is about as good as the person standing right behind me. What you really want is you want the opinion of the attorney.
So helping them understand when they need to reach out.
When they need to drop a dime for an attorney. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and then the last thing I wanted to ask about on this podcast here is HOAs and seller disclosures on that. So you also, in their representation, help them disclose any information on the HOA?
Yeah. So we have a document here in Arizona, and everybody's different throughout the United States, but here in Arizona we have an HOA document. It's an addendum. And you fill out who the HOA is, you fill out the contact information, you fill out how much the HOA is, are there certain fees, are there certain capital improvements, what are dock prep fees, things of that nature. You want to get that as accurate as possible, so once the buyer puts an offer in on the property and the buyer gets it accepted from the seller, the buyer then can contact these people, ask for the CC&Rs, ask for the sustainability of the HOA. Some HOAs, like for instance up in the Saddlebrook area, one of their HOAs is really hurting. They now have to send out a special assessment. Now, some people say that the HOA is mismanaged. Some people say that the HOA tried to keep fees low for so long and it was not a really good idea to do. I'm not casting blame. I don't know. I don't know enough information about it. But if I'm buying in that community, you better believe I want to have their P&L.
Profit and loss statement?
Yes, I want their P&L statement.
Okay.
And where are their assets? Do they have $1 million or only $100,000 or only
Right.
$10,000?
What do they have as a contingency
As
plan?
reserves,
And
right.
what does that mean for a potential buyer?
Right. And what do they cover?
Right.
And what are there any pending special assessments out there. So now everything that gets sold up in that development, there has to be notification by the seller and also the real estate agent, because the real estate agent is not relieved of disclosing things if they know about it. So like if I knew they were going to have a $4,200 assessment, and the seller didn't, because the seller lives in Ontario and
Right.
only comes down here a little while and he doesn't get his mail delivered up there, he really probably wouldn't know about it. But me as a real estate agent, it doesn't relieve me of the responsibility of sharing that
If you know.
information.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. Well, that is a lot, and I think that's actually just a little bit of
Yeah,
what
that's
you
about
do.
25%.
Okay, great. Well, hey, I appreciate your time today with these 10.
Okay.
And we look forward to hearing some more in our next podcast.
Thank you for listening and watching the Nitty Gritty of Real Estate podcast here with the Tom J. Krieger team of Keller Williams, Southern Arizona. If you are interested in buying a home, selling a home, or even investing in real estate, we have 5,000 agents across the country that we can connect you to. If you need any free resources, feel free to check out our website at www.thetjkteam.com. We hope you have a great day.